God. Going too fast. I'm taking 3.
I'm going for the singles now.
Oh, no.
Son of a bitch.
You get your 2?
Yeah.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thotgor here, of course, and today we are going to take a look at the Bayern. So as I mentioned in yesterday's video, I have since sold the Bayern and moved on to the guys now, so I figured probably a good time for us to take a little look here at the Bayern. She's actually a really nice battleship at tier 6. My only complaint about her only has to do with my playstyle versus the playstyle of the ship itself. So my playstyle, you know, I do really value speed and maneuverability, and this is what I want above all. I really want a ship that will do at least 30 knots, is what I sort of value. It's that 30 knots that it just gives me the flexibility on the battlefield to move around a little quicker, whereas, you know, in the Bayern here, I think we go 25 knots is the top speed of the Bayern, which is actually the fastest tier 6 battleship, but it's still too slow for me. It's still not something I totally enjoy. But other than that, other than you know, the ship just not complementing my playstyle, she's a great battleship at tier 6. You know, we've got some good maneuverability on her. Because she's a little slower, it means she is able to take some pretty tight turns. So you're good in dodging torpedoes. The guns on the Bayern are something else. They do hit very, very hard, and the guns are accurate. I can't tell you how many destroyers I have actually killed in this thing with my main battery guns at maybe 10, 13 kilometers away, you know, somewhere in that vicinity. Unbelievable. Couldn't believe it. So we've got that going for her on the Bayern here as well. Now, she's a battleship, so, you know, she's pretty decently armored here as well. She can definitely get in there and fight it out amongst some other tier 6 battleships. When you start getting into, like, if the Bayern gets dragged into a tier 8 game, for example, and you start having to deal with higher caliber guns, higher muzzle velocities and all that stuff, the Bayern's armor will it will let you down. I mean, it's still decent and it's still good, and you'll probably, you know, get away with a few hits without, you know, too much damage. But the armor's not going to stand up to higher caliber shells. Just isn't. We can see right there the accuracy of the guns, right? Those few shots went right into that enemy destroyer and took out about half the enemy destroyer's health, so that's not too shabby at all. What else do we get with the Bayern, though? The Bayern, much like a lot of the other German battleships, especially, well, no, basically all of the German battleships, we have got some great secondary armament on this ship. Actually, I think out of all of the battleships in the German line, I think the Bayern actually has the least amount of secondary batteries. Correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but I think that she has the least amount of them out of all. But still, the ones that she does have, you know, they are still great secondaries, and I would recommend, if you have an abundance of your the flag that extends your secondary battery range, if you have an abundance of those flags, I would definitely run those flags on your German battleships all the time. Why not? They really do some great work here in the game, and I mean, even once you get up to you know, when you get into the guys now and the Bismarck, your secondaries are going to become really phenomenal. So as well with your German captains, I would highly recommend getting everything you can to do with increasing the range, accuracy, reload speed, and survivability of your secondary batteries. Now on the Bayern, I knew I was going to sell the Bayern, and again, she just doesn't complement my play style, so I knew I wasn't going to keep her, so I didn't actually buy any upgrades for her. Had I did, or had, you know, I've actually gone through with that, I definitely would have been purchasing secondary battery upgrades for her, right, just to get those decked out even further. The Bayern, when she's coming across cruisers like we have in this situation, I think it's a York and we'll say Nuremberg, off in the distance, not too big of a deal. The biggest thing, I guess, like all battleships, is just being set on fire, right? Getting caught with your repair on cooldown and you're on fire. So that is a bit of a concern when you are coming across cruisers. However, if you can hit the cruisers and do some citadels on the cruisers are going to melt away very, very quickly. And, you know, again, it's attributed to the guns on the Bayern. There are some great guns. Now, how the Bayern compares to the other Tier 6 battleships we have in game. So we have the New Mexico and we have the Fuso. Yes, Russian battleships are not in game. So, I don't know. I know myself, I kept the Fuso. And I still have the Fuso, and I like the Fuso more than the Bayern. The reason why I like the Fuso more than the Bayern is because the Fuso has better range. And I know that can be considered stupid, but it's why I like the Fuso more than the Bayern. But when you do compare the Bayern to the other classes, I think the Bayern does come out ahead of the Fuso, even though the Bayern doesn't have the range that the Fuso has. I think the Bayern would come out ahead of the Fuso, as long as the Fuso isn't able to focus down the Bayern at distance. Now, between the Bayern and the New Mexico, I don't know, to be honest. I haven't played US battleships since closed beta. Haven't touched them. So, you know, I don't really know what the consensus is on New Mexico versus Bayern. I do know that the New Mexico is a really good ship at Tier 6. Really good battleship at Tier 6. She's a little frightening when you come across her and you are in a cruiser and you know that New Mexico is eyeing you down with those guns. So there's that. I can't even remember, and I don't know, yeah, maybe I should have looked it up, but I can't remember who can shoot further and who has the most armor. I want to say the Bayern has the most armor and can shoot further, but I don't know. The Bayern, though, doesn't have a scout plane or a fighter plane. Now, this is something that the American battleships do get at Tier 6. I'm fairly confident that the New Mexico does get a scouting plane at Tier 6, so it does increase the range there. Even the Fuso gets a scouting plane at Tier 6, even though you don't necessarily need it. But there is that as well, right? So we don't get any extensions to our firing range. I think the maxed out firing range that we have on the Bayern, what is that, 17.7, I think is the max. And actually 17.7 kilometers is not a bad distance at all. Stock distance, I mean, that's still pretty decent. And there's a lot that you can do with that distance as well. I mean, obviously when you first get the Bayern, I think she does have a lower range, and it's somewhere around 15 kilometers potentially. But once you do get the ship fully upgraded, she is quite nice. I really enjoyed her. And it's not, you know, it wasn't sad to sell her or anything like that, but it wasn't one of those ships that I just couldn't wait to get out of. I mean, I was excited to get in the guys now just because it's the guys now, but, you know, it wasn't like, oh, you know, get rid of this ship, I never want to see it again. In fact, a lot of people, too, that I've been talking to in the clan, Master Chief especially, you know, really enjoy the Bayern and actually are going to end up keeping the Bayern, and it might become their new Tier 6 battleship. And that totally makes sense. She is pretty decent. Now, turret traverse, yeah, she's a little slow. Now, when you do get the stock ship, the turret traverse is going to be just horrendous. But as you get it upgraded, and ideally as well, you've got your captain skills to increase the turret traverse there, it does become a whole lot more manageable. The rate of fire isn't too bad. It is definitely comparable with the other Tier 6s that we have, Tier 6 battleships we have in game. The fastest reload on a Tier 6 battleship we have in game right now is the Dunkirk. I do believe she is the fastest reload on out of any of the Tier 6 battleships, and then I'm not sure where the Bayern fits in after that, but it still is definitely manageable. And the Bayern, you know, it's nice. Again, it does offer you some flexibility. You have the option of, you know, choosing to fight mid-range, choosing to fight close in, and the ship will perform pretty well at both distances. I wouldn't recommend necessarily fighting at your max distance in the ship all the time, being 17.7. You're just not going to contribute a whole lot, and you're really limiting the ship itself as well. I mean, even though, yeah, 25 knots, I said it's slow and whatnot, but even in this battle, you can see I was still able to kind of get around the battle, even though for the majority of this battle, you know, I was situated on the western side of the map. On the western side, I was still able to move around a little, right? And the range of the Bayern still allows me to be able to reach out and touch a few people who are within my range. We are hopefully about to see some pretty nice shots here on a Fuso. The Fuso, like I say, I do enjoy the Fuso. I think it's a great battleship, but the Fuso does not have the armor that you may want her to have. She just doesn't. So when you are fighting a Fuso in the Bayern, it is going to be relatively easy to rack up a lot of damage very quickly and potentially even get yourself some Citadel hits there as well. And they will do massive amounts of damage, which is something that is constant in the German battleship line. The guns hit like a train. If those guns, specifically too when you're in the lower tiers and your accuracy might not be so great, or even with the guys now, frankly, with the stock guys now, your dispersion and your accuracy is so off. But even if you do manage to hit something with one of your shells, it's going to do some significant damage. They do pack a pretty big punch, which is great. And it's something that we would have expected anyway out of the German battleship line. For anyone who has a Tirpitz, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Tirpitz doesn't necessarily have the best dispersion either, but when those shells do hit, they hit hard. And it's a constant throughout the German battleship line. I'm actually excited to get to the tier 9 and 10 German battleships just because I hear some pretty awful things about them, and I just want to see for myself. Whether or not I'm actually going to get a tier 10 battleship is another question, but it's something to work towards, I suppose, anyway. Another nice thing that the Bayern does offer you as well is a pretty strong bow, right? If you wanted to or if you had to, you can turn bow into a target and you can absorb or tank a little bit of that damage there, which is not too shabby at all. Depending on, what tier of ships you are fighting will determine whether or not it's actually going to be a good strategy to do, but it is an option that exists to you if you wanted to try it out. We can see my secondary batteries are starting to do some work here on this Murmansk. Again, I can't, even though it's the Bayern, and she doesn't have anywhere near the secondary battery power of a Bismarck, it is still pretty impressive, the secondary armament on the Bayern. I really do enjoy it. It just offers you that I don't know, the peace of mind of knowing that, if a destroyer or another ship happens to get close into you, you should be able to deal with it, depending on the reaction time involved. But, you at least have the guns to be able to deal with it if you need to, right? So that's not too bad at all. So you can see in this battle I did earn myself a nice little Confederate medal there. We got the close quarters expert as well on the kill on the Murmansk, which wasn't too bad. And devastating strike there as well. Was that from the Murmansk? It's possible, can't remember. But a number of secondary battery hits there as well, which, isn't... At first it was surprising for me because I wasn't used to playing battleships where I'm getting like a bunch of secondary hits, but quickly it becomes sort of, par for the course, I guess. You're going to get a few secondary battery hits. So overall, this battle wasn't too bad, about 94,000 damage done. I finished first overall, which is always great as well. Give me the experience and the credits that I was saving up for the old guys now, which isn't too bad at all, but all in all, I think the Bayern is a really nice battleship at tier 6. And so far, in the German battleship line, I've been enjoying them. Enjoying them as much as I can, but I have been enjoying them. The only one, I guess, that I really wasn't too much of a fan of was the Kaiser at tier 4. Wasn't a big fan of the Kaiser, but it still had its moments. So moving into our next clip, you can see we're on Fault Line. Classic map here, especially for this tier as well. And again, we're just going to sail out the Bayern. We're going to see what we can get accomplished in this battle. And again, the Bayern is well suited to this task, right? To get this done. Not too shabby at all. Now, I mean, given, the battleship is a battleship, right? But because of the secondary battery, and especially on, like, this map here, you could consider going down into C, the C cap zone over on the east. Now, the reason why I say could is because you have your secondary batteries, and usually we know that light cruisers and destroyers are going to head over there. If you encounter these folks, your secondary batteries should be able to maybe deal with them, but hopefully deter them as well, right? Just to keep them back at a distance. And the maneuverability of the ship could afford you the chance of actually dodging incoming torpedoes. So there is that option. And because of the secondary battery on the ship, it does make it a little more flexible than what you could see at other tiers. Now, I think it's probably important to keep in mind here as well. The commander on the Bayern, on my Bayern right here, does have the advanced firing training, the tier 4 captain ability. So I do have that on the ship. So that's something to keep in mind. And I think I'm flying a secondary battery flag as well. Not 100% sure. I think I am. But just keep that in mind. And why I wanted to mention that was because I didn't want, it just suddenly dawned on me that maybe the Bayern doesn't have, the maximum secondary battery firing range. It could actually be held by the Fuso or New Mexico. Not sure, but still, just to throw that out there to cover my own butt. Anyway, moving over to A, right? Classic move here on fault line, especially being in a battleship. We're going to go to A and we're going to see what we can get accomplished, see what we can do. But again, the speed, 25 knots, isn't so terrific. It's not so bad in that, like you'd have to, say, pick a direction and sail in that direction for the entire battle, because if you try and go anywhere else, you'll just never make it anywhere. It's not that bad, but it is still painful. I just don't like ships that don't go at least 30 knots. It makes a world of a difference. That 5 extra knots, world of a difference, at least to me anyway. Something though that is nice as well about the Bayern is you do get to take a look at the development of the Bayern as you're working your way through the hulls of the Bayern. So a little history on the ship. The Bayern class of battleships did not participate in the Battle of Jutland. They were commissioned into the German High Seas Fleet shortly after the Battle of Jutland. So they weren't actually there to be able to take part. But the whole idea, this was the last battleship that was built for the Imperial German Navy. I think that's what they would have been called. The World War I German Navy, right? It was the last class of battleship that was built. It was the last battleship as well that was built under Kaiser Wilhelm's naval plans. And she saw very limited combat throughout the rest of World War I. As we know, but the Battle of Jutland was essentially the biggest naval engagement in World War I, and it really didn't decide a whole lot, right? It didn't, other than, well, I guess it was a tactical victory for the British is how it went down, because even though neither side clearly had a victory after the Battle of Jutland, the Germans still weren't able to break the blockade, so, supplies still weren't able to come through, so the British still came out on top. But the Bayern class of battleship did see limited combat where was it? Oh, I always forget. The Baltic Sea against the Russians. There were some limited engagements there where the where the Germans would come in and shell some ports, right, and leave. I think there might have been even one small naval engagement between a Bayern and some Russian cruisers, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So very limited indeed. However, I really don't think that, if she would have participated at the Battle of Jutland, that would have made, that much of a difference. Because keep in mind, too, I think there were I think there was a total of 4 Bayern-class battleships that were ordered, of which 2 were completed and commissioned to the Navy. The other 2, I believe, were cancelled because at that point in time, Germany needed to redirect all of its resources into the land war, right? The war on the Western Front against the Allied forces. So there was that. But yeah, I don't think she would have, ultimately affected or a big change to the Battle of Jutland. Would have been a little extra firepower there for the Germans, obviously. But the British, keep in mind at this point in time too, the British had a lot. I mean, their navy was the largest in the world. So even just for the Germans to try and match the British fleet is a massive, massive undertaking. That ultimately we know they never actually were able to break that blockade on Germany. One thing you do want to watch out with in your Bayern, and I mentioned it in the last replay as well, is you do want to watch out for any ships that are of any battleships that are a higher tier of you, and as well limiting your broadsides. Right? The Bayern doesn't necessarily have the armor that you may want. It is still decent. Pretty decent armor indeed. However, like this Bayern that we're looking at now, if that Bayern were to pump a full salvo into me, I am definitely going to feel it because I'm broadside to the Bayern, right? And it's going to do some significant damage to me here as well. So you do want to keep this in mind, and you do want to watch out for it every now and then. Sometimes it does get annoying with the number of over-penetrations that you do get. It is a little annoying, but it happens, and you just have to kind of, keep your cool, just reload your guns, fire again, hopefully this time they'll do damage, and we will get the kill. But there's that as well, and it's fairly consistent with a lot of the battleships. It just seems to be the meta of the game right now. But that shot there that just went into the Cleveland and took him out, you can see the grouping of those of that salvo, right? Very, very accurate. It's not going to be accurate all the time because we need to keep in mind RNG is at play in every battle we are in. However, there are times when the accuracy of this thing will just completely astound you. It's happened to me more than one time in this battleship. We saw it in the last replay as well, where I was able to, hit a destroyer at a bit of a distance, take out half of its health. I've had better situations than that where I fired out a destroyer like 15 kilometers away, all my shots hit the destroyer and take out the destroyer. It's amazing. And there are times when this ship will completely surprise you. Completely and utterly. It is actually quite amazing. But overall, Bayern sitting at tier 6, I like her. Again, I didn't keep her, but it's, just because it's not my playstyle. But I do like the ship. I definitely understand why people would want to keep her. And when I'm fighting against, in these battles, and I see a Bayern on the enemy team, I instantly know to be careful, right? Be careful, because this Bayern could potentially snipe me out and just take me down, right? Like, you see a Fuso on the enemy team, and right away you're going to have to be careful because that Fuso is going to be able to fire at range. It's going to be able to fire at range, right? And maybe hit you, maybe get a lucky citadel, do a bit of damage. Mid-range, you do want to watch out for the Bayerns. You want to watch out for the Bayerns and the New Mexicos, right? We can't forget about the New Mexico. The New Mexico is one hell of a battleship. When you're close in, you also want to watch out for the Bayern and the secondary batteries that the Bayern has. Really it's mid to close range that the Bayern is really going to excel, at least in my experience. I mean, this is all subject to my opinion, right? I mean, your opinion can very well change, and there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. But just to throw that one out there as well. But yeah, mid to close range seems to be where the Bayern really does excel, and it's where you do want to watch out. It's where the Bayern is going to be the deadliest, and if you're fighting off against a Bayern, you do want to be careful. Very, very careful, right? Don't want to get yourself overextended. The Bayern could quickly come along, get a nice, land a nice lucky salvo or something into you, and you're gone. So you do want to try and limit that. Damage potential of the ship is actually quite high. You saw last game, it got about 94,000. I wouldn't say that 94,000 is the average for me in this ship. I think my average for me in this ship would probably hover around maybe 65, 70,000 or damage per battle is probably going to be my average in this ship. But she is capable of dishing out a whole lot of damage. It's all subject, really, at the end of the day, to RNG. Whether or not the dispersion on your shells for that salvo is going to be good enough to actually land and hit something, right? That really is what it's going to come down to. But she is fully capable of dishing out damage, well over 100,000 damage this ship can pull off without really any issue. We can kind of get a sense of the durability of the Bayern here in this little battle we have. You can see we do have a Fuso. I know the Fuso's stock. We can tell the Fuso's stock. Look at the hull. But still, the Fuso still has guns and has been firing them at us and hasn't been doing that great of a job. This is something, too, that I notice a lot of people doing as well, as they'll see the German battleship and they'll fire HE at the German battleship, right? Not necessarily that bad of an idea. The German battleships do have good armor, that we know. And, I mean, if you're firing high explosive and you can keep those fires going, yeah, it's going to take down the German battleship. Whether or not a battleship should be doing it, I don't know. It depends on the angle of the Bayern itself, I guess. But it still is sort of viable, I suppose. It definitely is something that angers me when I'm in the Bayern, right, and people are firing high explosive, because I know, like, oh goddamn, I'm gonna burn down. So there's that. But still, overall, happy with the Bayern. I enjoy the experience playing her. Like I say, I didn't keep her, but it has nothing to do with the ship. It's just didn't want to keep her. I have a Dunkirk and I have a Fuso, and I figure at tier 6 that is good enough to represent tier 6 battleships for me. Fuso and Dunkirk. I play the Dunkirk a whole lot more than I play the Fuso. But yeah, not a bad ship, and definitely enjoyable, right? And she has her lessons to teach you as well. About the German battleships, right? You learn that, hey, she's got some really great secondary armament. You learn about the guns on the German battleship. I mean, you obviously would start learning this once you're, from the Nassau upwards. But you really do start getting a better sense of their performance and potential performance in the Bayern. I mean, the Conning at tier 5 also has some amazing guns on her as well, but at least with the Bayern, and you get that extra distance out to 17.7, where the Conning I think is only about 15 kilometers. Just that extra 2.7 kilometers allows you to use your guns a lot more and to gain much more of an appreciation for them and what they can accomplish. So battle here on Fault Line has gone incredibly well. My team is winning. We've got one enemy destroyer remaining, and then we can call it victory, so not too shabby at all. But these were the two replays that I wanted to take a look at when discussing the Bayern. The first one was because it did sort of, show off secondary battery and some accuracy of the ship as well. And then here in the second battle, we do see more of an average game in the Bayern, what you could expect more often than not. 77,000 damage, which is, yeah, pretty normal. You are going to get some citadels as well. You're going to get your secondary battery hits. We got to see a little bit of the durability of the Bayern here as well, which she's fairly durable, so that's not too shabby at all. But battle is over and victory is ours. Fantastic. You can see in this battle I did manage to pull off a Dreadnought and a, what is that? Unsinkable? Unsinkable, we're about to see, yeah, unsinkable. Yeah, that's because I was flooding, right, and I didn't actually get killed, so that's not too shabby at all. Anyway, 258,000 credits isn't too bad. I think I finished, yeah, second overall in the team. That's always great. We can see a little bit about, how the damage was spread out here on the battle, which wasn't too bad. And of course, when all is said and done, I do end up walking away with credits and experience. Fantastic. Yeah, so all in all, I was happy with the Bayern. She does offer some new sort of twists on the battleship at tier 6, so she's interesting. Not too shabby at all. Well, alright, that is the end of today's video. I do hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking around, watching it through. Remember to leave any comments you have for me in the video comment section below. Hit the old like button if you'd like today's video. Hit subscribe if you are not a subscriber. And as always, I do hope you enjoy the rest of your day.